On September 3, 2016, an industrial mixer in a Los Angeles restaurant claimed the life of Anthony Torres. But the real story begins 6 months earlier, with a touch that should never have lingered, a kiss that should never have happened, and a spiral of obsession that would destroy 3 lives in ways none of them could have imagined. In the heart of Reseda, Los Angeles, December 2015 arrived with an unseasonable warmth that had neighbors' Christmas lights reflecting off lingering autumn leaves. The Torres-Thompson home at 18742 Strathern Street stood quietly proud among similar ranch houses, its modest holiday decorations and well-maintained lawn reflecting the careful financial planning of its owners. The single-story, 1,500-square-foot home represented 8 years of shared dreams and calculated sacrifices, each mortgage payment a step toward their version of the American dream. The morning began like any other, with Anthony Torres checking his service schedule from the small home office he'd carved out of their garage. At 35, his HVAC business had grown from a single van and a handful of tools to a respected local operation with 2 employees and a growing list of commercial clients. His calloused hands moved across the keyboard with surprising dexterity as he mapped out the day's repairs, the gold band on his left hand catching the early morning light. In the kitchen, Rebecca Thompson-Torres packed her lunch with the same efficiency she brought to managing her bank branch. At 33, she'd risen from teller to branch manager through a combination of night classes and relentless determination. Her dark hair was pulled back in its usual neat ponytail, her outfit carefully selected from the business professional wardrobe she'd built piece by piece during sales at Macy's and Nordstrom Rack. Victoria Santos emerged from what had once been their home gym, now converted to a temporary bedroom for Rebecca's younger sister. At 29, she carried herself with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent years navigating restaurant dining rooms, her recent promotion to assistant manager at Mesa Grill marking a bright spot in an otherwise challenging year. Her divorce papers, finalized 3 months ago, sat in a folder beneath her bed, a reminder of how quickly certainty could crumble. "Coffee's ready," Rebecca called out, the morning ritual unchanged despite the approaching holiday party they'd host that evening. She'd already reviewed the budget twice, ensuring their gathering would be festive without straining their carefully managed finances. The coffee maker had been a wedding gift, outlasting many other presents through Anthony's careful maintenance. "Thanks, Becky," Victoria replied, using her sister's childhood nickname as she grabbed her travel mug. The sisters shared a quick smile, their similar features highlighting their relationship despite their different styles, Rebecca in her conservative bank attire, Victoria in the smart casual look required of restaurant management. Anthony emerged from the garage, work orders in hand. 3 service calls this morning, then I'll pick up the supplies for tonight. He kissed Rebecca goodbye, a gesture as routine as their shared morning coffee. "Don't forget Miller's Restaurant Group wants that maintenance quote by Monday. I mentioned you to their regional manager again yesterday," Victoria added, checking her phone for the evening's reservation numbers. He was complaining about their current contractor. This casual intersection of their professional lives had become routine. Anthony serviced the bank's HVAC systems at a discounted rate. Victoria ensured her restaurant's catering services were available for credit union events, and Rebecca helped both of them manage their growing financial portfolios. Their worlds operated in comfortable synchronicity, each success building on the others. The day unfolded with practiced efficiency. Anthony's HVAC van, recently detailed with his company's new logo, moved through the valley traffic from one service call to another. His business phone rang steadily, a mix of regular clients and new referrals, each call carefully logged in the system Rebecca had helped him set up. During his lunch break, he stopped by La Mesa Grill, ostensibly to check their refrigeration units but also to leave a repair quote for the regional manager Victoria had mentioned. At Valley Community Credit Union, Rebecca's morning began with a staff meeting. Her office, with its carefully chosen motivational posters and neatly arranged family photos, reflected her methodical approach to life. A picture of the day she'd met Anthony sat prominently on her desk, him in his work uniform, her in her teller's blazer, both smiling as he fixed the branch's temperamental AC unit. That chance encounter in 2007 had led to coffee, then dinner, then 8 years of building a life together. Victoria's day at La Mesa Grill started with inventory counts and staff schedules. Her recent promotion had come with its own set of keys and responsibilities, a vote of confidence from management that helped ease the sting of her failed marriage. The divorce hadn't been anyone's fault, really, just two people who'd married too young, growing in different directions until the space between them became unbridgeable. Living with her sister and brother-in-law hadn't been part of her 5-year plan, but their spare room and unwavering support had provided a safe harbor in the storm. As evening approached, the Torres-Thompson home came alive with preparation. Rebecca's organizational skills transformed their modest living room into a welcoming gathering space. The furniture, while not expensive, had been chosen with care over their years together, each piece representing a small victory in their financial journey. Family photos lined the walls, telling the story of their shared life. Their wedding day, Anthony's first business license, Rebecca's promotion ceremony, family vacations carefully saved for and thoroughly enjoyed. The party itself showcased their position in the community. Anthony's business clients mingled with Rebecca's fellow credit union employees, while Victoria's restaurant colleagues added a younger energy to the mix. Conversations flowed between work stories, renovation plans, and cautious optimism about the coming year's opportunities. The food, prepared with Victoria's professional expertise and Rebecca's budgeting skills, disappeared steadily as evening wore on. "Remember when you two first moved in?" Sarah Rodriguez, who'd helped Rebecca secure her management position, asked as she gestured around the living room. Anthony was so worried about the old AC unit. He inspected it 3 times before making an offer. Rebecca laughed, leaning against her husband. "And now he's got contracts with half the restaurants in the valley." She felt Anthony's arm tighten slightly around her waist, a gesture of shared pride in their progress. The moment caught Victoria's eye as she passed through with a coffee pot. Something flickered across her face, perhaps remembering her own failed marriage, but she covered it quickly with a practiced server's smile. Her divorce had taught her how fragile happiness could be, how quickly certainty could dissolve into doubt. Later that night, after guests had departed and dishes were cleared, the three sat in their modestly furnished living room. Rebecca reviewed the month's budget on her laptop, a habit that had helped them weather the 2008 recession. Anthony calculated quotes for upcoming jobs, while Victoria scrolled through apartment listings on her phone, her presence both welcome and a reminder of life's uncertainties. "The Miller restaurant chain looks promising," Anthony mentioned, looking up from his paperwork. "Regular maintenance for all 6 locations. That's wonderful." Rebecca's financial mind immediately calculated the stable income this would represent. "We could finally start that emergency fund we've been talking about." Victoria looked up from her phone. "Their locations have been having constant issues. I hear complaints from other managers all the time." The night ended as most did, Rebecca setting up the coffee maker for morning, Anthony checking the security system he'd installed himself, and Victoria quietly retiring to her temporary room. The house settled into the comfortable silence of a home where each person knew their place and role. None of them could have known that this carefully constructed life, built on practical decisions and mutual support, was about to unravel. The security system would prove useless against internal threats, the carefully maintained budget would buckle under the weight of secrets, and the family bonds they all took for granted would be tested in ways none of them could imagine. But that December night, the Torres-Thompson home simply stood as one of many in Reseda, a testament to 8 years of shared dreams, hard work, and the belief that playing by the rules would lead to happiness. The Christmas lights twinkled steadily, the heating system hummed efficiently, and 3 people drifted off to sleep, each believing they knew exactly who they were and where they belonged in the story of their intertwined lives. January dawned with an unusual chill in Reseda, bringing with it subtle shifts that would later be recognized as the first fractures in the Torres-Thompson household. The changes began innocuously enough, a series of small adjustments to routines that had, until then, run like clockwork. Anthony's first service call to La Mesa Grill came on a quiet Tuesday morning. The restaurant's walk-in freezer had malfunctioned overnight, and Victoria had called him directly rather than going through the usual channels. "The regional manager's breathing down my neck," she explained, watching him work in the confined space. The cold air made her cross her arms, hugging herself as she leaned against the doorframe. "Hand me that wrench," Anthony asked, his voice slightly muffled under the unit. Their fingers brushed as she passed the tool, a moment of contact that lingered a fraction too long. Neither acknowledged it, but both felt the slight electric charge of inappropriate awareness. At home, Rebecca immersed herself in preparation for an upcoming regional manager position. Her laptop glowed late into the night as she studied banking regulations and leadership strategies. "You've been working so hard lately," Anthony commented one evening, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder before he headed to bed alone. Victoria's schedule at La Mesa began showing unusual patterns. Day shifts appeared more frequently on her calendar, coinciding with Anthony's maintenance visits. "It's just easier to oversee repairs during my shift," she explained when Rebecca noticed, her eyes fixed on her phone screen where another text from Anthony about repair schedules waited to be deleted. The first truly dangerous moment came in February. Anthony was checking the kitchen ventilation system, his shirt damp with sweat as he worked above the hot stoves. Victoria brought him water, her restaurant uniform exchanged for more casual clothes since her shift had ended. In the narrow space between the prep stations, she reached past him for a clipboard, her body pressing briefly against his back. They both froze. Anthony turned slowly, their faces inches apart in the steamy kitchen air. For one breathless moment, neither moved. Then a line cook's voice shattered the tension, and they jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Family dinners became exercises in unspoken tension. One Sunday evening, Rebecca shared exciting news about her potential promotion. "They're considering me for the regional position," she announced, her face glowing with pride. Victoria and Anthony exchanged a quick glance. Too quick to notice unless you were looking for it. Too long to be entirely innocent. Anthony's habits shifted subtly but noticeably. New gym memberships appeared on their joint credit card statement. His work uniforms were replaced with better-fitting versions. When Rebecca commented on the changes, he shrugged it off. "Just trying to stay healthy for the business," he said, avoiding her eyes as he checked another text message. The excuses began piling up with the precision of carefully stacked cards. Emergency repair calls that ran late. Complex maintenance issues requiring multiple visits. Equipment orders that needed to be picked up in person. Each explanation was perfectly reasonable, documented with professional invoices and detailed time logs that Rebecca never thought to question. March brought unseasonable warmth and with it, the moment that would cross the final line. Anthony was completing a routine check of the restaurant's rooftop units after closing. Victoria had stayed late to catch up on paperwork, though her desk remained untouched. They met in the dry storage room, ostensibly to discuss the building's chronic ventilation issues. The space was tight, lined with shelves of supplies and lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. Victoria reached up to point out a vent, her movement bringing them close together in the narrow aisle. "We shouldn't," Anthony whispered, but his hand was already finding her waist. "I know," Victoria replied, even as she turned to face him. The first kiss was brief, almost chaste, a testing of forbidden waters. The second lasted longer, carrying the weight of weeks of suppressed attraction. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, the reality of their actions hanging heavy in the climate-controlled air. They left the storage room separately, carefully maintaining professional distance. But something fundamental had shifted, a boundary crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. The carefully constructed walls of their daily lives had developed their first significant crack. Back home, Rebecca noticed nothing unusual when Anthony returned late, smelling of his usual work environment. She was absorbed in her laptop, reviewing quarterly banking reports. Victoria came home shortly after, claiming a late inventory session had kept her at work. The guilt manifested differently in each of them. Anthony became overly attentive to Rebecca, bringing home small gifts and suggesting weekend plans they both knew his work schedule wouldn't allow. Victoria threw herself into apartment hunting with sudden enthusiasm, though her browser history showed more searches for local hotels than rental properties. Their text messages became more frequent but carefully coded. Equipment check needed meant, "I miss you." Supply delivery indicated an opportunity to meet. Each message was deleted immediately after reading, leaving no trace in their phones but deeper marks on their consciences. The restaurant became their stage, a place where professional interaction could mask growing attraction. Anthony found reasons to check equipment during Victoria's shifts. Victoria discovered endless maintenance issues requiring immediate attention. Their performances were convincing, a contractor and client discussing legitimate business concerns. But beneath the surface, every interaction crackled with dangerous energy. March ended with another family dinner, this one marked by careful distances and avoided gazes. Rebecca shared updates about her promotion prospects, her excitement a sharp contrast to the heavy atmosphere she couldn't quite identify. Anthony and Victoria maintained their roles perfectly, passing dishes and making appropriate comments while beneath the table, their feet touched briefly, another small betrayal in an expanding web of deceits. Later that night, as Rebecca slept peacefully beside him, Anthony stared at the ceiling, his phone silently holding another deleted message. In her temporary room, Victoria lay awake, her finger tracing the edge of her phone where Anthony's latest text had been and then wasn't. The foundations were cracking, hairline fractures spreading through their carefully constructed lives. But like any structural damage, the true extent wouldn't be visible until the whole thing came crashing down. The simple happiness of December felt like a distant memory, replaced by the complex web of attraction, guilt, and betrayal that would eventually destroy them all. The security system blinked its steady green light, protecting them from external threats while the real danger grew inside, fed by stolen glances, forbidden touches, and the intoxicating thrill of secret desire. March crept toward April, carrying them all closer to a point of no return that none of them could yet see, but all of them, in their own ways, could feel approaching. April brought spring rains to Reseda, but inside La Mesa Grill's storage room, the air was thick with different kinds of storms. Anthony pressed Victoria against the metal shelving, their lips meeting with the desperate intensity of people who'd long since abandoned caution. The box of receipts she'd been pretending to organize scattered across the floor, adding to the growing collection of their careless mistakes. Someone could walk in, Victoria whispered, even as her fingers tightened in his shirt. Their encounters had grown more frequent, more reckless. The pretense of equipment checks had given way to barely concealed rendezvous. Marco, Anthony's assistant technician, was the first to notice the patterns. "Boss, we've been to La Mesa 6 times this month," he mentioned, reviewing the service logs. "Their equipment can't be that bad." Anthony brushed off the observation, but Marco's puzzled frown lingered. The Comfort Inn on Ventura Boulevard became their regular meeting place, room 214 their private sanctuary. Anthony's business credit card statements showed weekly charges disguised as supply purchases. Victoria started claiming extra shifts to cover the costs of their meetings, her bank account showing regular withdrawals that didn't match her usual spending patterns. At Valley Community Credit Union, Lisa watched her friend Rebecca with growing concern. "You seem distracted lately," she observed one afternoon, noting the dark circles under Rebecca's eyes. "Is everything okay at home?" "Anthony's business is really taking off," Rebecca replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "He's always on call these days." She didn't mention the late nights, the distant look in his eyes, the way his phone now seemed permanently attached to his hand. The affair consumed them like a fever. Anthony began scheduling his legitimate repairs around their meetings, his once pristine service record showing delays and rushed jobs. Victoria reorganized entire staff schedules to align with his visits, raising eyebrows among her more observant employees. "The kitchen's getting kind of crowded during repairs," Jorge, the head chef, commented one day. "Didn't know AC work needed so much supervision." Victoria's sharp response about management oversight didn't quite hide her blush. Their phones became instruments of obsession. Anthony checked his messages compulsively, using a separate app with a hidden folder for their communications. Victoria kept her phone face down during family dinners, but her fingers would twitch toward it every time it vibrated. The Starbucks on Tampa Avenue served as their public meeting spot, far enough from their usual haunts to feel safe. They developed an elaborate code for these rendezvous. Equipment inventory meant morning coffee. Supply run signaled an afternoon meet. Each message deleted immediately, each meeting planned with the precision of people who knew they were playing with fire. Rebecca's unspoken concerns manifested in small ways. She started checking their joint account more frequently, noting the increased fuel charges, the random supply purchases, the unaccounted-for hours in Anthony's schedule. "Your maintenance costs seem high this quarter," she mentioned casually one evening. Anthony mumbled something about aging equipment and changed the subject. By May, their obsession began showing visible cracks in their professional lives. Anthony's business reputation suffered as he rushed through jobs to make their meetings. 2 longtime clients switched to other contractors, citing unreliability. Victoria's restaurant staff whispered about her frequent disappearances and distracted management style. "You've got lipstick on your collar," Marco said quietly one afternoon, helping Anthony load supplies. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. Anthony changed his shirt in the van, adding it to the growing pile of secrets he kept in his vehicle. The Paradise Motel became their newest hideaway when the Comfort Inn's desk clerk began asking too many questions. The shabby room with its buzzing neon sign and worn carpets was a far cry from their respectable lives, but neither seemed to notice. Their passion had taken on a desperate edge, each meeting more intense than the last. Lisa cornered Victoria at the bank one day, her loyalty to Rebecca overwhelming her professional discretion. "Whatever you're doing," she whispered, "it's killing your sister." Victoria's denial was automatic, but her hands shook as she filled out her withdrawal slip. June brought a suffocating heat to the valley, matching the intensity of their affair. They grew careless, their meetings becoming longer, more frequent. Anthony started leaving obvious traces, a restaurant receipt in his pocket, Victoria's hairpin in his van. Each near discovery only seemed to fuel their obsession. The restaurant staff developed an unspoken code. The AC guys here became their signal to avoid the storage areas. Jorge started timing his breaks to coincide with Anthony's visits, his disapproving glances following Victoria as she inevitably found reasons to inspect the repairs. Rebecca's promotion interviews suffered as her concentration wavered. How could she focus on banking regulations when her home life felt increasingly like a house of cards? She started taking sleeping pills, the empty space beside her in bed growing colder despite the summer heat. Their guilt manifested in strange ways. Anthony showered Rebecca with random gifts, jewelry she never wore, perfume that sat unopened. Victoria became obsessively helpful at home, cooking elaborate meals she barely touched. Their attempts at normalcy only highlighted how far they'd strayed from it. The breaking point approached with the inevitability of a summer storm. One evening, Marco found a handwritten note in Anthony's van, not explicit, but intimate enough to remove all doubt. He placed it quietly on Anthony's desk, its presence more damning than any confrontation. Regular customers at the bank noticed Rebecca's distraction. Mrs. Henderson, a loyal client for years, asked about the wedding ring Rebecca had unconsciously been twisting. "Marriage is hard, dear," she said kindly. "But secrets are harder." Their obsession took on ritualistic patterns. Anthony checked his phone exactly 17 times during dinner. Victoria walked past his van 3 times before each meeting, building anticipation. They developed superstitions, same motel room, same storage room spot, same excuses polished to a shine through repetition. The restaurant became their stage and their prison. Every corner held memories of stolen moments, every quiet space a potential meeting place. The walk-in freezer, the back office, the supply closet, all transformed from mundane spaces into landmarks of their obsession. As June drew to a close, their affair had become a living thing, consuming their thoughts, dictating their actions, deteriorating their judgment. They were past the point of rational decisions, running on pure adrenaline and desire, each encounter promising to be the last but only feeding their next. The warning signs multiplied, ignored in their haze of obsession. Marco's concerned glances, Lisa's pointed questions, the growing distance in Rebecca's eyes, all swept aside in pursuit of their next moment alone. Their lives had become an elaborate dance of deception, each step taking them closer to the edge of discovery. In the stifling heat of late June, they met in room 214 one last time, unaware that their carefully constructed world of secrets was about to collapse. The air conditioner hummed its familiar tune, covering their whispered promises and desperate embraces, while across town, Rebecca sat in her office, finally beginning to piece together the patterns she'd been subconsciously avoiding for months. July arrived in the valley with a record-breaking heatwave, the scorching temperatures matching the mounting tensions in the Torres-Thompson household. Rebecca sat at her desk at Valley Community Credit Union, staring at a stack of invoices from Anthony's business that didn't quite add up. The frequencies were wrong, the timestamp suspicious, and the supply costs inconsistent with their usual patterns. Mrs. Torres. Her assistant's voice broke through her concentration. There's an issue with your husband's business account. Several charges from the Paradise Motel have been flagged for potential fraud. Rebecca's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the report. I'll look into it, she said, her banker's training helping her maintain composure even as her personal world began to tilt. The charges appeared every Tuesday and Thursday, coinciding with Victoria's newly regular days off. At La Mesa Grill, the summer business had picked up, but Victoria's management showed signs of strain. She forgot staff schedules, missed inventory counts, and spent long periods staring at her phone. The security cameras captured her frequent disappearances into the storage areas, though the footage never seemed to include her exits. Something's going on with Victoria and that AC guy, Jorge, the head chef, muttered to the waitstaff during a lull. Been seeing his van in the parking lot even when nothing's broken. The whispers spread through the restaurant's ecosystem, adding to the growing web of suspicion. The annual Valley Business Association picnic in mid-July nearly exposed everything. Anthony and Victoria had grown careless, their subtle glances and brief touches becoming more noticeable. Lisa, Rebecca's colleague, watched them with growing concern as they gravitated toward each other throughout the event. Rebecca, Lisa finally said, pulling her friend aside. There's something you should, but her words were cut short by the arrival of Anthony, who suddenly appeared with forced cheerfulness and a plate of food for his wife. The community began to buzz with subtle gossip. Mrs. Peterson, a regular at the bank, paused during a transaction to pat Rebecca's hand. My first husband had a wandering eye too, dear. The signs are always there if you're willing to see them. Anthony's business started showing serious cracks. Marco, his assistant, began looking for other work, tired of covering for his boss's increasingly erratic schedule. 2 more commercial clients cancelled their maintenance contracts, citing unreliability and missed appointments. Your husband seemed distracted during the last repair, a restaurant owner told Rebecca during a loan review meeting. Left the job half-finished to answer some urgent call. Never used to be like that. Victoria's guilt manifested in increasingly obvious ways. During Sunday family dinners, she barely ate, pushing food around her plate while avoiding eye contact. She brought expensive peace offerings, designer handbags for Rebecca, premium tools for Anthony, items well beyond her assistant manager's salary. The first concrete warning came in early August. An unmarked envelope appeared in Rebecca's work mailbox, containing printed copies of text messages between Anthony and Victoria. The conversations were carefully coded but unmistakably intimate. Rebecca locked the pages in her desk drawer, her hands shaking. Anthony grew sloppy with his deceptions. One evening, Rebecca overheard a hushed phone conversation from their garage. I can't stop thinking about you. I'll find a way to get there. Yes, now. When confronted, he claimed it was a desperate client with an emergency repair, but his nervous energy told a different story. The restaurant's security system proved to be their next near-undoing. During a routine review, the district manager noticed prolonged gaps in the storage room footage. Victoria blamed it on equipment malfunction, but the timestamp logs showed manual overrides using her code. Rebecca's professional mask began to crack under the strain. During a client meeting, she burst into tears when the elderly woman mentioned her upcoming wedding anniversary. Lisa covered for her, but word spread through the bank's gossip network, adding another layer to the community's growing awareness. The Paradise Motel's charges continued appearing on Anthony's business account with damning regularity. Rebecca created a spreadsheet, mapping the charges against Victoria's work schedule. The pattern emerged with mathematical certainty, each data point a new crack in her heart. Mid-August brought a company barbecue at La Mesa Grill, where the careful distance between Anthony and Victoria finally slipped. A bus bar caught them in what appeared to be an intimate moment near the ice machine. By evening's end, the story had spread through the entire staff. Your sister seems very close to your husband, Jorge finally said to Rebecca during a catering consultation at the bank. His meaning was clear, his discomfort obvious. Rebecca thanked him quietly for the observation, adding it to her growing file of evidence. Victoria's apartment hunting became frantic, as if she needed an escape route. She left rental listings open on her laptop, circles drawn around places far from Reseda. Yet she never actually viewed any properties, trapped in the gravity of her affair. The business account irregularities multiplied. Supply orders that never arrived, service calls without corresponding invoices, mileage reports that didn't match job locations. Rebecca's bankers caught each discrepancy, building a paper trail of betrayal. Anonymous notes began appearing, under Rebecca's windshield wiper, in Victoria's restaurant mailbox, in Anthony's service van. Someone knew, perhaps several someones, and the weight of public knowledge hung heavy over their increasingly fragile deceptions. Late August brought the closest call yet. Rebecca arrived home unexpectedly, a migraine cutting her workday short, only to find Anthony's van in the driveway when he was supposed to be across town. She heard movement inside, then silence, then elaborate explanations about forgotten tools that rang hollow in the summer heat. The final warning came from an unexpected source. The Paradise Motel's owner, reviewing his security footage for an unrelated incident, recognized Victoria from La Mesa Grill. His casual comment to a regular customer set off a chain of whispers that finally reached Rebecca through the neighborhood grapevine. By month's end, the pressure had become unbearable. Victoria's work performance deteriorated further, leading to a formal warning from her district manager. Anthony's business teetered on the edge of crisis, his reputation tarnished by inconsistent service and missed appointments. Rebecca's perfect professional facade showed hairline fractures, visible to anyone who knew where to look. The evidence mounted in Rebecca's desk drawer: motel receipts, suspicious texts, security footage stills, witness accounts. Each new addition felt like another stone on her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to maintain the fiction of normalcy. The summer heat began to break, but the temperature in the Torres-Thompson home continued to rise. Every dinner became a minefield of unspoken accusations, every phone notification a potential revelation, every late night at work a possible lie. Rebecca scheduled a surprise visit to La Mesa Grill for early September, ostensibly to review their business banking needs. The real purpose of her visit remained unspoken, written only in the steady hand that marked the appointment in her calendar. Tuesday, September 3rd, 7:30 p.m. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter their carefully constructed world of secrets and lies. As August drew to a close, the three players in this tragedy moved through their final days of pretense, unaware that their time of reckoning approached with the inexorable certainty of an oncoming storm. September 3rd, 2016, began like any other Tuesday in the San Fernando Valley. The late summer heat had finally broken, bringing a deceptively peaceful evening to the La Mesa Grill. The restaurant's evening rush had ended, leaving only the quiet efficiency of closing procedures and inventory counts. At 7:15 p.m., Victoria Santos began her monthly inventory check, her clipboard moving methodically through the kitchen area. The restaurant was nearly empty, just Jorge finishing his cleanup and two servers counting their tips. The industrial kitchen hummed with its usual background noise, the steady drone of refrigeration units, the rhythmic pulse of the dishwasher, the low whir of ventilation fans. Anthony Torres arrived at 7:25 p.m., his HVAC service van pulling into his usual spot behind the restaurant. His work order listed a routine maintenance check of the kitchen ventilation system, though no such maintenance had been scheduled by management. He carried his toolbox with practiced casualness, nodding to the departing servers as he entered through the back door. Rebecca Thompson-Torres sat in her car across the street, watching her husband's familiar van pull in. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, the folder of evidence sitting heavy on the passenger seat beside her. Bank statements, motel receipts, suspicious texts, and security footage stills. A paper trail of betrayal collected over months of growing suspicion. At 7:30 p.m., Victoria's inventory count brought her to the kitchen office, a small room tucked between the walk-in freezer and the dry storage area. Anthony found her there, the pretense of checking vents forgotten as soon as the door closed behind them. Neither heard the back door open again, neither noticed Rebecca's quiet footsteps approaching. The kitchen office door stood slightly ajar, spilling a thin line of light into the dimly lit corridor. Rebecca moved silently, her banker's heels already removed in the car, allowing her to approach undetected. The sound of hushed voices and muffled laughter drew her forward like a moth to flame. Time seemed to slow as she reached the door. Through the gap, she could see them clearly. Anthony pressed against the desk, Victoria in his arms, their embrace intimate and unambiguous. The clipboard lay forgotten on the floor, inventory sheets scattered like fallen leaves. "I love you," Anthony whispered, the words cutting through the ambient kitchen noise like knives. "We need to tell her soon. I can't keep living this lie." Victoria's response was lost in the sudden roaring in Rebecca's ears. Her hand pushed the door open with unexpected force, the metal handle striking the wall with a sharp crack that made the lovers jump apart like startled teenagers. The next few moments passed in a blur of motion and emotion. Victoria stumbled backward, her face draining of color. Anthony straightened quickly, his mouth opening to form words that wouldn't come. Rebecca stood in the doorway, her carefully collected evidence slipping from nerveless fingers to scatter across the floor. "How long?" The question came out in a whisper, then again as a scream. "How long?" The sound echoed through the kitchen, drawing Jorge's attention from his cleaning. He moved toward the commotion. Recognition dawned on his face as he pieced together the scene unfolding before him. Victoria found her voice first. "Becky, please, let me explain." "Explain?" Rebecca's laugh held no humor. "Explain how you've been sleeping with my husband? In my house? While I helped you get back on your feet." Anthony stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "Rebecca, this isn't how we wanted you to find out." "We." The words seemed to break something in Rebecca. She lunged forward, her hands finding purchase on Victoria's uniform. The sisters stumbled backward through the office door, into the main kitchen area. Anthony followed, trying to separate them as their shouts echoed off stainless steel surfaces. Jorge moved toward the phone, recognizing the situation spiraling out of control. But before he could reach it, the struggle had moved deeper into the kitchen. Victoria backed away from her sister's advance, bumping into the industrial dishwasher. Steam hissed from its vents, adding to the chaos of the moment. Rebecca's hand found the safety latch of the massive mixer mounted on the prep station. Her fingers wrapped around it without conscious thought, the metal cool against her palm. Anthony reached for her, trying to pull her away from Victoria. What happened next would be debated in witness statements and court documents for months to come. The safety latch broke free in Rebecca's grip. The mixer, its mounting weakened by age and vibration, began to tilt. Anthony, seeing the danger, pushed both sisters aside. The industrial mixer crashed down with terrible finality. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. Anthony lay motionless on the floor, pinned beneath hundreds of pounds of steel and motor. Victoria's scream pierced the steam-filled air as she fell to her knees beside him. Jorge's 911 call was logged at 11:43 p.m. "We need an ambulance at La Mesa Grill. There's been an accident. A man is hurt bad. Please hurry." Victoria's attempts at CPR were frantic and futile. Her restaurant training took over as she compressed his chest, counting desperately between sobs. "Stay with me. Please stay with me." Rebecca stood frozen, the broken safety latch still clutched in her hand. Her eyes remained fixed on the scene before her, unblinking, uncomprehending. The folder of evidence lay scattered around her feet, its damning contents now meaningless in the face of tragedy. Emergency services arrived at 11:45 p.m. Paramedics worked quickly, efficiently, but their efforts were brief. Anthony Torres was pronounced dead at 11:47 p.m. The official cause listed as massive trauma and internal bleeding. The police found Rebecca exactly where she'd stopped moving, her designer business suit splattered with dishwater and blood. When they approached her, she spoke only once. "I just wanted to know the truth." Victoria had to be physically pulled away from Anthony's body, her hysterical crying echoing through the now crowded kitchen. Jorge provided the first coherent witness statement, his account punctuated by the continued sounds of Victoria's grief. By midnight, local news vans had begun arriving. The first report aired at 12:15 a.m., breaking news from Reseda tonight, where a tragic accident at La Mesa Grill has claimed the life of a local HVAC technician. Sources say the victim was performing routine maintenance when an industrial mixer apparently malfunctioned. The kitchen, usually alive with cooking sounds and busy staff, now hummed only with the whispered conversations of crime scene investigators. They photographed the mixer, the broken safety latch, the scattered papers that told the story of a months-long affair. Evidence markers dotted the floor like yellow breadcrumbs, leading from the office through the kitchen to the spot where Anthony Torres took his last breath. Rebecca sat in the back of a police car, responding to questions with vacant eyes and monosyllabic answers. Her sister's mascara-streaked face appeared occasionally in the window of an ambulance, oxygen mask fogging with each ragged breath. The night manager arrived to secure the restaurant, his keys jingling unnaturally loud in the tense atmosphere. He passed Anthony's HVAC van, still parked in its usual spot, tools laid out for a repair that would never be completed. By 2 a.m., the story had evolved. Tragic accident claims local businessman's life, read the crawling text on news channels. Reporters stood in the parking lot, their faces lit by camera lights as they pieced together the sanitized version of events that would lead their morning broadcasts. None of their reports would mention the affair, the confrontation, the broken safety latch in Rebecca's hand. Those details would emerge later, through investigations and interviews, through whispered conversations and court testimonies. For now, in the first shocking hours of September 4, 2016, 3 lives lay in ruins in the kitchen of La Mesa Grill. Anthony Torres, dead at 35, his secrets dying with him. Rebecca Thompson-Torres, mute with shock, her carefully ordered world shattered beyond repair. Victoria Santos, sedated in an ambulance, her guilt and grief merging into an unbearable weight. The industrial mixer was eventually hauled away as evidence, leaving a dark stain on the kitchen floor that no amount of cleaning would entirely remove. Like the lives it had destroyed, some marks would prove permanent, some damage irreparable. In the parking lot, Rebecca's folder of evidence blew open in a late-night breeze, scattering bank statements and motel receipts across the asphalt. A young officer gathered them carefully, not yet understanding their significance in the tragedy he was documenting. The first light of dawn would find the restaurant still cordoned off with police tape, its windows dark, its kitchen silent. Inside, a single ceiling light illuminated the scene of tragedy, casting sharp shadows across the floor where a family's secrets had finally, fatally, come to light. Detective Carlos Ramirez stood in La Mesa Grill's kitchen at dawn on September 4, 2016. Steam from the crime scene technician's coffee mingling with the lingering scent of industrial cleaner. The industrial mixer lay where it had fallen, now surrounded by yellow evidence markers and casting long shadows under the forensic lights. "Walk me through it again," he instructed the overnight officer, his recorder capturing every detail. The initial report seemed straightforward: tragic workplace accident, grieving widow, hysterical sister-in-law. But 20 years of homicide investigation had taught Ramirez that tragedy rarely wore its true face in the first 24 hours. The restaurant's security footage told the first story. Camera 4 showed Anthony Torres entering at 7:25 p.m., toolbox in hand. Camera 2 caught Rebecca arriving through the back door at 7:30 p.m. The kitchen office camera had been disabled, routine maintenance, according to the log, but the timing raised Ramirez's first red flag. "Pull the maintenance records for the past 6 months," he instructed his partner. "Every visit, every repair, every invoice." The papers would begin telling their story within days. Frequent visits, irregular hours, service calls that didn't match any reported issues. The crime scene unit methodically photographed the scattered contents of Rebecca's folder. Bank statements showed regular charges at the Paradise Motel. Text messages, printed and annotated in Rebecca's precise handwriting, revealed coded communications. A pattern emerged in black and white, spelled out in credit card receipts and phone records. Marco, Anthony's assistant, provided the first breakthrough. The business was suffering, he explained in his statement. Jobs half done, appointments missed. All started around April. And he was always at La Mesa, even when nothing needed fixing. The financial audit painted a darker picture. Rebecca's banking expertise had caught the irregularities early: motel charges disguised as supply purchases, mileage reports that didn't match job locations, inventory discrepancies that suggested a business owner distracted by something more consuming than work. Jorge, the head chef, broke down during his third interview. Everyone knew, he admitted, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. The long repair visits, the storage room meetings. Victoria changed her shifts to match his schedule. We just didn't want to get involved. The restaurant staff statements filled in more gaps. Busboys who'd seen intimate moments in the storage room. Servers who'd overheard hushed phone calls. A dishwasher who'd found Victoria crying in the walk-in freezer the week before the incident. Each account added another layer to the foundation of secrets that had finally collapsed. Phone records provided the timeline Ramirez needed. Hundreds of calls and texts between Anthony and Victoria, starting in April and intensifying through the summer. The communications peaked in August, dozens of daily exchanges, often late at night or early morning, when Rebecca would have been asleep or at work. The Paradise Motel's security footage proved particularly damning. 2 months of recordings showed Anthony's van and Victoria's car meeting regularly, usually during her supposed inventory counts or his claimed repair calls. The motel owner's statement confirmed their regular use of room 214. "Did you suspect anything?" Ramirez asked Lisa, Rebecca's colleague at the bank. Her tearful response spoke volumes. "I tried to tell her, that day at the picnic. But how do you tell your friend her husband and sister?" The unfinished sentence haunted the interview transcript. The forensics report on the mixer arrived in October. The safety latch showed signs of stress predating the incident. Poor maintenance masked by cosmetic repairs. Anthony's last service report had noted the issue, scheduling a replacement that would never happen. Victoria's police interview, conducted once she was stabilized, filled in the emotional gaps. It started with a touch, she whispered, staring at her hands. Just a moment in the storage room. Then moments became minutes, minutes became hours. Her description of their growing obsession matched the timeline of business decline and community gossip. Rebecca's statement, taken at the station, was clinical in its precision. She listed dates, times, locations, all meticulously documented in her banker's handwriting. The folder of evidence she'd brought to La Mesa that night represented months of quiet investigation, each piece carefully collected and verified. The restaurant's internal communications revealed more oversight failures. Maintenance logs had been altered, security footage deleted. Victoria's manager codes had been used to access restricted areas during Anthony's visits. Each digital footprint formed another piece of the tragedy's foundation. By November, the investigation had constructed a clear sequence of events. The affair had begun in April, intensifying through the summer. The business suffered as Anthony's attention wavered. Victoria's management performance declined. Rebecca gathered evidence silently, methodically, until that final September evening. The mixer's maintenance history became crucial evidence. Scheduled repairs had been neglected while Anthony focused on unauthorized visits. The safety latch, already compromised, couldn't withstand the force of Rebecca's grip during the confrontation. A tragic confluence of negligence and emotion. Community interviews painted a picture of widespread awareness. Neighbors who'd seen Anthony's van in unusual places. Bank customers who'd noticed Rebecca's distraction. Restaurant patrons who'd witnessed suspicious interactions. A collective blind eye turned until tragedy forced everyone to see. The district attorney's office reviewed the case in December. The evidence suggested a clear narrative. A months-long affair discovered by a methodical wife. A confrontation that turned physical. An accident born of neglected maintenance and emotional crisis. Not murder, but not quite a simple accident either. Ramirez's final report ran to hundreds of pages. It documented a slow-motion collapse of 3 lives, tracked through bank statements and security footage, witness accounts and phone records. The physical evidence told one story, but the emotional evidence, the texts, the witnesses, the community's silent knowledge, told another. The investigation officially closed on December 15, 2016. The cause of death remained accidental, but the report noted contributing factors: improperly maintained equipment, emotional distress, physical altercation. A tragedy built on a foundation of small decisions and growing secrets. The evidence boxes were sealed and archived, folders of bank statements, hours of security footage, transcripts of interviews that revealed how thoroughly a community could see without speaking. Each item catalogued and stored, ready to tell its part of the story of how 3 lives unraveled in a restaurant kitchen on a September evening. Detective Ramirez filed his last notes as winter settled over the valley. The case was closed, but its lessons lingered. How secrets grow in familiar spaces. How tragedy builds from small compromises. How truth, once exposed, can prove more devastating than any lie. 5 years after the tragedy at La Mesa Grill, the ripples of that September evening continue to spread through the San Fernando Valley. The restaurant still stands, though under a different name and management. Local residents have learned to avoid mentioning the incident, but its shadow lingers in quiet conversations and careful glances. The criminal proceedings concluded in early 2017. Rebecca Thompson faced charges of negligent homicide, but the evidence supported her defense of accidental death. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning a verdict of not guilty. The civil suits that followed, from Anthony's family, from the restaurant, from insurance companies, settled quietly out of court. Victoria Santos left California the day after the verdict. Her testimony had been clinical, emotionless, as if speaking about strangers rather than her sister and dead lover. She relocated to Phoenix, where she found work managing a small cafe. Her employees there know nothing of her past, though some notice how she avoids the kitchen during equipment maintenance. La Mesa Grill's parent company sold the location within months of the incident. The new owners gutted the interior, replaced all the equipment, and reopened under the name Valley Bistro. The industrial mixer's mounting point remains visible in the kitchen floor, though few current employees know its significance. Rebecca's banking career ended the day of the incident. Valley Community Credit Union accepted her resignation with understanding and discretion, providing references that carefully omitted the circumstances of her departure. She moved to Sacramento in 2018, where she now works as a private financial consultant, her married name replaced by her maiden one. Anthony's HVAC business dissolved in the months following his death. Marco, his assistant, purchased the client list and van at auction, building his own successful company from the ashes of his former employers. He maintains a small memorial photo of Anthony in his office, though the frame faces away from client seating. The Paradise Motel stands unchanged, its neon still buzzing on Ventura Boulevard. Room 214 remains in regular rotation, though the current manager doesn't know its role in the tragedy. The old security footage was submitted as evidence, then archived in a courthouse basement, its digital record of secret meetings now gathering virtual dust. Jorge, the head chef who witnessed the tragedy, left the restaurant industry entirely. He opened a small food truck, preferring the simple equipment and open air to the enclosed spaces and industrial machinery of commercial kitchens. His statement appears in training materials for restaurant safety programs, though his name has been changed. The community's response evolved over time. Initial shock and gossip gave way to uncomfortable silence, then to cautious reflection. Local marriage counselors reported an uptick in appointments in the months following the incident, as couples faced their own secrets and unspoken tensions. The Torres-Thompson home sold in late 2017. Rebecca couldn't bear to return after that night, leaving the sale to her realtor. The new owners renovated extensively, erasing the physical traces of the family that once lived there, though neighbors still sometimes point it out to visitors in hushed tones. Lisa, Rebecca's former colleague at the bank, maintains sporadic contact through social media. Their conversations carefully avoid mentioning the past, focusing instead on safe topics: weather, work, general pleasantries. The weight of unspoken words hangs heavy in the long pauses between messages. Victoria attempted reconciliation once, in 2019. Her letter to Rebecca was returned unopened. She sends Christmas cards to their parents but doesn't attend family gatherings. Their mother's recent funeral marked the first time the sisters occupied the same space since the trial, Victoria in the back row, Rebecca near the front, neither acknowledging the other's presence. The business community adapted its practices. Local banks implemented stricter oversight of small business accounts, watching for patterns similar to those Rebecca had documented. Restaurant maintenance schedules face higher scrutiny, equipment safety protocols tightened. Small changes born from tragedy's lessons. Anthony's parents visit his grave monthly, maintaining the simple headstone with quiet dignity. They never removed the photos of him from their walls, though pictures including Rebecca or Victoria have been carefully stored away. Their holiday gatherings have grown smaller, quieter, marked by careful conversations that avoid certain topics and names. Marco's HVAC business thrives, though he instituted strict policies about solo repairs and after-hours calls. His workers know nothing of these rules' origins, accepting them as standard safety protocols. The tragedy shaped his business practices in ways his employees may never understand. The legal records tell one story: depositions, evidence logs, trial transcripts filed away in courthouse archives. But the human cost spreads wider, touching lives in subtle, lasting ways. Restaurant staff are more observant of workplace relationships. Bank managers scrutinize small business accounts more carefully. Families guard their secrets more closely. Rebecca's new life in Sacramento bears no obvious marks of the past. Her apartment is modern, minimalist, free from family photos or mementos. Her clients know her as efficient, professional, perhaps a bit reserved. None know why she flinches slightly when passing restaurant kitchens or service vans. Victoria's Phoenix Cafe succeeds through her obsessive attention to detail. Her employees note her focus on equipment maintenance, her strict protocols about security cameras and storage rooms. She works long hours, lives alone, keeps her past locked away like the restaurant's daily receipts. Local media occasionally revisit the story on slow news days, usually around anniversaries. Their sanitized accounts focus on workplace safety and equipment maintenance, the human elements reduced to careful euphemisms and vague references to personal complications. The Valley Bistro's current staff share urban legends about the building's history, most versions straying far from the truth. The kitchen floor's patch marks spawn various theories, none quite capturing the real tragedy that occurred there. Time and turnover blur the details, but something of that night lingers in the space. 5 years on, 3 lives remain forever changed. Rebecca builds her new identity around career and independence. Victoria manages her cafe with rigid precision, protecting herself from emotional entanglements. And Anthony rests in the valley he called home, his grave marking the end of a story that began with a simple repair call and ended in unimaginable tragedy. The community learned its lessons, though whether they'll stick remains uncertain. Secrets still grow in familiar spaces, trust still breaks in unexpected ways. But in one corner of the valley, 3 intertwined lives serve as a cautionary tale about the price of betrayal and the weight of unspoken truths. As 2022 draws to a close, the tragedy's ripples continue spreading, touching lives in ways both obvious and subtle. Each person involved carries their own version of the story, their own lessons learned, their own scars both visible and hidden. In the end, the true aftermath isn't measured in legal verdicts or business closures, but in the quiet changes to countless lives touched by one fatal evening in a restaurant kitchen.